Good afternoon. I wanted to make you guys a video in case anybody is having difficulty with the study guide. The study guide is very similar to what you will see on the exam on Tuesday, which is all going to be very similar to what you saw in class on Friday. Study guide, you need to do problems 2 through 5, so 2, 3, 4, 5, and then problems 8 through 12. Okay? So I'm going to show you about 4 examples that will help you with all of them. So the first 2 questions that you need to do, problems 2 and 3. They are segment addition problems and involve midpoint. So what you want to remember is anytime you see midpoint, you are going to have 2 segments that are going to be congruent to each other. So we will end up setting those segments equal to each other to solve for x. I'm going to use this study, this review sheet to so I'm going to solve this problem, which will help you solve numbers 2 and 3 on the study guide. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to do 8b on this one. Okay, so it tells us that Q is the midpoint of PR, and if PQ is 3x plus 14 and QR are 7x minus 10, to find x. So the very first thing you want to do is draw a picture. So come over here. This is going to be 8b. Okay, so we will draw so it says Q is the midpoint of PR. So we'll draw P, R, Q. Okay, so Q is the midpoint of PR. PQ is 3x plus 14. And QR is 7x minus 10. Okay, so we know that if this is the midpoint, that means this segment is congruent to this segment. So the question is asking us what x is. But I believe that the question on your study guide is going to ask you for what the entire length is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and find the entire length here because that's what you need to find in problems 2 and 3. So what we do is we set these equal to each other to solve for x. Okay, and then once we get x, we're going to plug x back into here. Or we could put it in there. Either way, it's going to be the same answer because they're congruent to each other. And then once we plug it in here, we'll multiply it by 2 because it's going to be half of this entire length. So from this point on, or from this point, it's just going to be an algebra problem. And I know you guys know how to solve a basic algebra problem, so I'm going to do this one pretty quickly. So we're going to have 4x equals 24. Okay, we'll have x equals 6. Okay. So then we're going to take the 6 and plug it into here. Okay, when I do that, that means from there to there is going to be 18 plus 14, or 32. So 32 is the length from P to Q. And we want to know what the distance from P to R is. Well, if PQ is 32, then we know that QR is also 32. So the whole entire distance is going to be 64. Okay, so you're going to model that problem to solve numbers 2 and 3. Okay, and then number 4 on your study guide. So we're just going to graph the figure in the coordinate plane and find the perimeter around to the nearest hundredths. Okay, so what you would need to do is go ahead and plot the points. So we would have, go ahead and get you started on this one. So it's going to be at 1, 2, 2, 8. 2, 5, sorry about my dog in the background, 6, 5, and 8, 10, up here, 8, 10 is going to be up here, okay, Okay, so we want to know the perimeter of this figure. Now on the exam and on your study guide, well, this is the one from the study guide. It's on the exam, it's just going to be a triangle, but it's going to be the same concept. So in order to determine the perimeter, we have to find the distance between each point to figure out the side lengths. And once we figure out all 4 side lengths, we just add them all up. We know anytime we have a vertical line or a horizontal line, all you have to do is count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that side's going to be 4. 1, 2, 3. That side's going to be 3. Okay, so we need to find the distance from there to there, and then distance from there to there. And I'm going to do this example over here to show you how to do that. Okay. All right, so we need to find from C to A. So remember the distance formula. Okay. If you want to use the formula, that's fine. x2 minus x1. You will not be given this formula on the exam. But if you know the formula and want to use it, feel free. I recommend solving it this way instead of having to really remember this formula. If you can just remember the distance or the change in x plus the change in y. Okay, and what that means is we'll do AC first. AC. So A is going to be at 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 4, 4. B is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, negative 3, negative 3. And C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, negative 9, negative 1. Okay. So we would just do from there to there. Okay, so we find if you want to use this, actually we're going to do this one first. So this is the change in the x value, so the distance from left to right. So how far is negative 9 from negative 4? And we just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're 5 units apart from left to right. So all we do is write 5 squared right there. Okay, and then we find out how far they are from up and down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're 5 units apart up and down. Alright, so that's also going to be 5 there. Okay, and we end up, when we square them, we end up getting 25 plus 25, and then we get the square root of 50. Okay, and when we work that out, it ends up being 7.1. Okay, and just to show you, it works the same way over here. Negative 9 minus negative 4 plus negative 1 minus 4. So that ends up being negative 5 squared plus negative 5 squared, which ends up being 25 plus 25, which is the same thing that we have there. Okay, so that's side 7.1. Okay, and then go ahead and write the other. Run out of room on that paper, so I'm going to write the rest of it over here. Okay, so then we do the same thing for this side. So from distance left to right, so that's going to be 1 unit. So we would just write 1 squared. Okay, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7 squared. Okay, so that ends up being 1 plus 49, and then as you notice, that's also going to be square root of 50. So that's also going to be 7.1. And then the last one, how far from left to right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 squared. How far up and down? 1, 2. 2 squared ends up going to be 36 plus 4. It's going to be the square root of 40. And the square root of 40, I believe, is going to be right at 6.4. And then we would just put 6.4 right there. And then we would just add them all up. So 7.1, 7.1, add it up. 6, 20, 20.6. And so the answer, you want to make sure you round it to whatever decimal place it says. I could only remember what it is to the nearest tenths. But on the test, you're just going to have to round to the nearest whole number. So if we rounded this one to the nearest whole number, it would end up just being 21. Okay, so you will do this problem just like that. This one you would just round to the nearest hundredth. So again, you would just need to do what we did just there for here and there. Okay. All right, so that is the distance formula. You'll also use the distance formula for number 9 right here. Distance formula there, and you'll also use it for number 10 right there. Okay. And then the last, actually 2 more concepts that we have is finding the midpoint and the endpoint. Okay, midpoint is very simple. Probably the easiest concept we have on this exam. So if we look at number 9, so for number 9, we need to not only find the distance from Colton to Saddlebrook, but we also need to find the midpoint of the 2. And so all you do to find the midpoint is you add up the 2 x's, divide by 2, and add up the 2 y's and divide by 2. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do an example. I'm going to do number, let's see, I think it's 3. Okay. So to find the midpoint, all we do is 2 plus -1 divided by 2, and then 4 plus 7 divided by 2. So that ends up being 1 over 2, which is 0.5. 4 plus 7 is 11 over 2, which is 5.5. And that's our answer, 0.5 and 5.5. So this point right here would be halfway between that and that. So that's what you're going to do right there. You're also going to do that on number 11 right there. Okay, so those 2 will both be midpoint. And so the last problem we have is finding endpoint. So we find the endpoint, that one will be done on number 5, endpoint, and number 12. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and write, so you can see segment addition, distance. This one is endpoint. And this one here is, that's just vocabulary. And this one is distance and midpoint. And this one is distance, midpoint, endpoint. And vocab. Okay, so the last one is finding an endpoint when you're given a midpoint and endpoint. We're going to use number 7a here. All right, so it says to find the coordinates of R if Q is the midpoint of PR and P has a coordinate of 5, 6. So you need to draw this out first so you can kind of figure out. I already knew that it was finding an endpoint, but sometimes you may not, so it's always best to draw it out so you don't get confused. So find the coordinates of R if Q is the midpoint. So we know Q is the midpoint, so then we know that P has to be an endpoint in R. So that's why we know that R is the endpoint we're looking for. So P is 5, 6. Q is -1, 3. There are 2 ways to solve this problem. Doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get the answer correct. And I'm going to write it out over here. So you would set it up like this: endpoint, midpoint, endpoint, like so. Okay, and we're going to write the endpoint here, 5, 6, and the midpoint, -1, 3. And we need to find the other endpoint. So one way to do this is we need to determine, ask yourself, what do I do to 5 to get to -1? Okay, so I'm going to write like this. Okay, so to get to 5 to -1, we're getting smaller, so we're going to be subtracting. We're going to be subtracting 6. So 5 minus 6 is -1. And because we want this distance to be the same as this distance, we're going to do the same thing. So we ask ourselves, what is -1 minus 6? So -1 minus 6 is going to be -7. Okay. Then we do the same thing for the y value. What do I do to 6 to get 3? Okay, we're getting smaller, so we're going to subtract, and we're going to subtract 3. So we'll do the same thing to 3. So 3 minus 3 is going to be 0. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Second way to do it, and this might be a little simpler if you can remember it, I'm going to do this one over here, is you take the midpoint and we divide that, you multiply that by 2. So we multiply each of those by 2, and then you're going to subtract the endpoint. So we'll have -1. So for the x value, -1 times 2, and then -5. So -1 times 2 is -2, and -5 gives us -7, which is what we have there. And then we'll do the same thing for the y. We'll just mark that out. Okay, y. So we've got 3 times 2 minus 6. So 3 times 2, 6, minus 6 is 0, which we have there. Okay. So again, I'll go ahead and show these. This is the study guide. Number 2, segment addition. 3, segment addition. 4 is distance. 5 is endpoint. Going to be 6 or 7. 8 is vocabulary. That'll be on page 1 on your notebook. 9 is distance and midpoint. 10 is distance. 11 is midpoint. And 12 is endpoint. So get all those, and you shouldn't have any issues on the exam on Tuesday. Good luck, guys.